caucus. There is a Samosa caucus. So there are various caucuses in the United States of America that includes senators and congressmen from both sides, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
Yes.
The announcement was made yesterday to have a quad caucus, which will include bipartisan. Which will have bipartisan participation from the Republican Party, as also from the Democratic Party, senators and congressmen and congresspersons alike.
Yes.
And that certainly is going to work on how to further Quad's interests. They're also talking about expansion of the Indo-Pacific when it comes to Quad. Whether it's a Quad plus or having a lot of other countries participating in Quad conversations is something we'll have to wait and see. The bigger idea over here, if you zoom out a little, Sneha, is how President Biden, in his last few months in office and his last and only term, is going to leave the legacy of a Quad leadership behind. So there are going to be key takeaways, big takeaways, but in terms of continuity, in terms of looking at how they're going to take it forward in the future.
Yes.
The bilateral conversations are going to be very significant, like Ambassador.
And news is coming in. The Prime Minister has landed in Philadelphia in the US. He's on a 3-day trip to the United States. Modi-Biden bilateral later tonight. That's on top of the agenda. He's there for a 3-day visit for the Quad Summit. We'll be getting in more details as my colleagues join us. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, is with us. And also Gaurav Sawant, our Managing Editor, also with us. Rohit Sharma continues to be with us from the US. For more on that, I'm going to be bringing in Gaurav to this conversation at this point in time. Gaurav, it's a 3-day visit of the Prime Minister. Now, all eyes really on the Quad, given the situation that we're seeing in various countries. But of course, the bilateral with US President Joseph Biden tonight. Give us a sense of what are the deliverables as far as India is concerned. What is it that we're looking at?
So this is a very important visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States of America. Do remember that this, in a way, is a farewell for President Joe Biden. This was India's turn to host the Quad Summit, and Quad 2024 was to be held in India, but at the request of the United States. And this also shows how close India and the United States are. The US requested, since it's President Biden's farewell, can this be held in the US? And India said, of course, go ahead. This also is the farewell of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan. So 2 of the 4 Quad's head of state and government would be bidding farewell to Quad in their personal capacities. And next year, when it's held in India, US will have a new president and Japan will have a new prime minister. But the bilateral one-on-one, look, India-US relationship, it's become much stronger than what it was earlier, and in new areas. And to an extent, defense, foreign affairs, strategy, coordination on Indo-Pacific, space technology, military technology. These are things which are really steering the India-US relationship. So there'll be an intense conversation on that. While Prime Minister has a one-on-one with the US President, he also has a one-on-one with all the other Quad members. So he'll be meeting Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, he'll be meeting Fumio Kishida, the Japan Prime Minister separately, and of course President Joe Biden. Then, he moves for the second leg of his visit, and that again is very interesting. Apart from his interaction with the Indian diaspora, it's the summit of the future, where the Prime Minister will lay a roadmap or his vision of how the world should tackle the situation that the world is facing right now. There are 2 very major battles that are on, one in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, the other between Israel and Hamas terrorists, and Hezbollah is a new angle to that war. So how do you ensure, one, there is a movement, there's a way forward, that you move towards peace. While you move to peace, the global supply chain is not adversely impacted due to these wars. And the global south, India is the voice of the global south or the developing countries. They are heard loud and clear.
Gaurav getting in those details. And Gaurav, even as I speak with you, we're staying in those pictures of The members of the diaspora, no visit of the Prime Minister outside of India abroad is complete without this huge show of support and love and respect that he gets from members of the diaspora, isn't it? And there is an event which is scheduled also, that is for tomorrow, I think, in New York, in Long Island.
You're absolutely right. A very important community event. It's the Indian American community, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has often described as
the Prime Minister meeting with the members of the diaspora right here, taking selfies, shaking hands with them, greeting him. Listening to the reactions that are coming in. These are pictures of the Prime Minister interacting with the diaspora in Delaware. Of course, he's got an organized event as well in New York where he is going to be tomorrow. Gaurav continues to be with us. Gaurav, as always, and we've been talking about it, the Prime Minister extremely popular with the diaspora, be it the US or any other country actually, where the members of the diaspora always welcome him. You know, and this has never happened before, isn't it? It's only with Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Well, the scale with which it happens with Prime Minister
Certainly.
Narendra Modi, the frequency with which it happens with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the number of countries it happens in. So right now, even here in Philadelphia, if you notice a number of people, Indian diaspora, they dressed in their traditional Indian best and they made a lot of paintings. Now, the diaspora to an extent knows that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is instantly drawn to pictures, to paintings. And one lady, for example, had painted a very beautifully Madhubani painting for the Prime Minister, and she asked him to autograph it. A youngster, a school kid, he'd actually made the Chandrayaan for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And another lady of Indian origin, she'd done another painting with Bharat Mata Ki Jai, written very strong.
Yes. Gaurav, I'll just tell our viewers, these are... And news is coming in. The Prime Minister has landed in Philadelphia in the US. He's on a 3-day trip to the United States. Modi-Biden bilateral later tonight. That's on top of the agenda. He's there for a 3-day visit for the Quad Summit. We'll be getting in more details as my colleagues join us. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, is with us. And also Gaurav Sawant, our Managing Editor, also with us. Rohit Sharma continues to be with us from the US. For more on that, I'm going to be bringing in Gaurav to this conversation at this point in time. Gaurav, it's a 3-day visit of the Prime Minister. Now, all eyes clearly on the Quad, given the situation that we're seeing in various countries. But of course, the bilateral with US President Joseph Biden tonight. Give us a sense of what are the deliverables as far as India is concerned. What is it that we're looking at?
So this is a very important visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States of America. Do remember that this, in a way, is a farewell for President Joe Biden. This was India's turn to host.
All right, Gaurav continues to be with us, even as we're staying with those pictures of the Prime Minister at the hotel, essentially, where an event, or rather a meeting, was planned with members of the diaspora. Gaurav, you, of course, were telling us about the manner in which this, in many ways, is very unique for an Indian leader, an Indian Prime Minister, and the scale of which and the frequency with which it happens.
When I was in Russia, a lot of Russian women had dressed up in traditional Indian attire because they also learn whether it's Bharatnatyam or Kuchipudi or Odissi or various other forms of Indian art. Similarly, here in Delaware, you have a lot of Indian women and you have some American women who are learning Garba and who are there at Delaware, for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and they're performing there. Indian women and Indian diaspora in large numbers, both at Delaware and then again in New York and New Jersey. As you know, and many people do call New Jersey Little India, given the large number of Indian diaspora that lives in that part, New York across the tunnel. In New Jersey, you have a lot of Indians, so they get there in large numbers. They perform. They keep Indian culture alive in the United States of America, and then they get a glimpse of it for the Prime Minister. Again, in Ukraine, the Indian diaspora performed a traditional Indian dance for the Prime Minister. You also see a lot of Indologists who come and meet the Prime Minister. He also makes it a point to meet those achievers, those super achievers, people of Indian origin who are doing extremely well in whatever country he goes to. He makes it a point to meet them and encourages them.
That's right, and the diaspora is important. You rightly said, Gaurav, that the Prime Minister has always said that they are the ambassadors of the country outside of India, isn't it?
They truly are. They are the human bridge. They are the ambassadors of India in those countries. And the fact that India is looked at with a lot of respect. What are Indians seen as anywhere in the world in today's day and age? That they're techies, they're very good in science and technology, that they're very intelligent, that they're very hardworking, they're very laborious. Compared to a lot of people from the neighborhood, India's neighborhood, who have a very bad reputation overseas. So Indians are always welcome. People from the neighborhood, India's neighborhood, may not be as welcome in several countries in the world. And that is because when Indians go and live in a country, they contribute very positively to their economy, to their society. They mingle very well, and they never create trouble in those countries. And this is something that the Prime Minister has often spoken of when he goes to those countries, whether it's in the United Kingdom. And you're well aware, Sneha, that in his first tenure, we had a huge event in New York called at the Madison Square Garden. Then another huge one in Australia, in England, and France, in various parts of the world, wherever the Prime Minister goes. And you remember in Australia, the Australian Prime Minister said that Modi is the boss. They're not used to having such crowds. For example, even the biggest crowd that they saw in Australia, bigger than even Bruce Springsteen, was when Prime Minister Narendra Modi got there. So he does galvanize the Indian diaspora. The diaspora is also very important, especially if you look at the kind of remittances they come from these countries, and especially West Asia, the Middle East. Those remittances are very important for India's economy. So that diaspora not only does very well in those countries, that diaspora is very important for the Indian economy. Also in terms of science and technology, in terms of sending that money back, in terms of getting that knowledge back to India, that diaspora plays a very critical role, and perhaps Prime Minister Narendra Modi understands that. And every time he interacts with them, he builds the India story. He builds India as an emerging world power story. And that's very heartening to hear across the world.
Well, absolutely. This is President Joe Biden's hometown in Delaware, where the Prime Minister is. We are expecting, of course, the event in New York, where there is an organized event for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as there always is. That really throws up no surprises. But in Delaware, where there is a significant chunk of the Indian population there, like the Prime Minister has always indicated that they are the ambassadors really of the country. Many people say that these are the people, these Indians living outside of India are really the secret weapon of the Prime Minister, because in fact, he enjoys their trust, and not just the trust, but the love and the respect. And that, I think, is always on display, no matter where the Prime Minister goes. Gaurav, in the year 2015, when the Prime Minister was in China, where I was covering him, he was in President Xi's hometown in Xi'an, and one wouldn't expect Indians to be there, but they were, and in large numbers. So they, of course, welcomed him in Beijing, in Shanghai, but they also welcomed him in Xi'an. Just, it's mind-boggling where Indians are, isn't it? There also is something that we need to talk about, but let's leave it at that for the moment. We'll talk about the diaspora and their presence just all over the world in a moment from now. But I want to talk a little about what is expected as far as the Prime Minister's meeting in the UN is concerned, where he's also going to be addressing the UNGA. Just talk to us a little about what that is going to, in fact, what one can expect from that, Gaurav.
So, Sneha, the UN address of the Prime Minister is very interesting. It's the summit of the future. How do you see this world emerge from the current crisis the world is in? And what is it that world powers can do together? Because the world is in turmoil in today's day and age. And what has the world seen? So first you saw a Cold War, and there were two blocks. You had the Soviet bloc, and then you had the NATO bloc. And then the Soviet bloc collapsed. But now you have Russia as a powerful country. You have the NATO as a very powerful bloc. And then you have China and Russia coming together. China is emerging again as a very powerful country. So the world is in flux. There's conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There's conflict between Israel and Hamas, and Israel and Hezbollah. And that conflict is impacting the entire world adversely, especially the Russia-Ukraine war, where oil prices went through the roof, where fuel wasn't available, gas wasn't available, food grain wasn't available, sunflower oil wasn't available. No, in this turmoil, what is it that the world can do? Not just America, not just Russia, not just China, but the world together. What can these countries do to navigate the world out of this turmoil? Point one. And point two, to ensure that the global south or the developing world is not ignored. Because, when you have a G7, they'll talk shop, and they'll only talk about what the rich European economies or the rich economies of the world and the United States, how do they come up and what do they do? It's all about them. But what about the developing world, which is actually, to a large extent, suffering the consequences of the actions of the developed world? So that is where India post G20 has emerged as a very strong voice of the developing world. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi articulates it, very, very strongly. He gets the world to sit back, listen, take notice, and then India hopes also take action. Now that food grain getting out of that Russia-Ukraine war, both Turkey and India played a very critical role to ensure that the global south wasn't adversely impacted, to get fertilizers out of Russia, to get food grain out of Ukraine, or to get oil out of Russia. Now look at the amount of pressure that was built on India not to buy that oil. And repeatedly that pressure was built on India. Do not buy Russian oil. Do not buy Russian oil. Should India have bought that expensive oil from the Middle East, as External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar repeatedly puts it? World prices are going up. Europe is taking so much of that oil, and they are jacking up prices. What should India do? Why should India suffer, or why should developing world suffer? That is why that cheap Russian oil brought relief not just to India, but once India, exported that oil once again to several countries of the world, it benefited those countries. So that's the point India is repeatedly making. Listen to the global south.
All right. Gaurav, be with us. I'm just going to come back to you in a moment from now to tell our viewers, and for the benefit of viewers who could have possibly just joined us at this point in time, we're getting you non-stop coverage of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 3-day visit to the US. A few moments ago, he landed in Philadelphia. These are pictures on your screen of the Prime Minister meeting up with the Diaspora. This, remember, is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first visit to the US since he took oath for the third consecutive time. Soon after landing, he met members of the Diaspora outside the Philadelphia airport and signed a few autographs. And later today, he's going to be holding talks with US President Joe Biden. That is on the agenda. Also will be attending the annual Quad Summit in Delaware, for which the Prime Minister is. The bilateral, of course, is in the sidelines of this. The Prime Minister is also scheduled to hold separate bilateral meetings with the other Quad leaders, where discussions will be focusing on defense, technology and collaboration.
I don't think there is any other politician like him who has given his life and has made India up on this stage, made sure that India is respected and loved, and he's brought it to the forefront of the world. And I'm so blessed to be with him, to welcome him to Delaware.
Modi ji is great. He has brought golden age of India back in front of us, and this is a historical moment for us to cherish.
ये किताब की पूरी रिसर्च शिकागो में की थी मेरे दोस्त ने, ये संजीव कुमार जी हैं, और उन्होंने ये किताब बहुत ही डिटेल्ड किताब निकाली है ऑन द गुप्ता एम्पायर. मोदी जी ने ये 2018 में लॉन्च करी थी. ये सेकंड एडिशन वो आज साइन करके गए हैं, तो ये उनके सिग्नेचर हमने लिए. एंड वी आर सो प्राउड बिकॉज दिस ब्रिंग्स आउट द हिस्ट्री ऑफ द चंद्रगुप्त एंड द एंटायर एम्पायर ऑफ द गुप्ता, सो द गोल्डन एज ऑफ इंडिया.
मोदी का हार्दिक स्वागत करने के लिए यहाँ पे उपस्थित रहे हैं.
And news is coming in. The Prime Minister has landed in Philadelphia in the US. He's on a 3-day trip to the United States. Modi-Biden bilateral later tonight. That's on top of the agenda. He's there for a 3-day visit for the Quad Summit. We'll be getting in more details as my colleagues join us. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, is with us. And also Gaurav Sawant, our managing editor, also with us. Rohit Sharma continues to be with us from the US. For more on that, I'm going to be bringing in Gaurav to this conversation at this point in time. Gaurav, it's a 3-day visit of the Prime Minister. Now, all eyes really on the Quad, given the situation that we're seeing in various countries. But of course, the bilateral with US President Joseph Biden tonight. Give us a sense of promoting collaboration in the area of technology, especially in AI and cyber security, highlighting India-UC space collaboration as well, promoting joint efforts in combating climate change, the focus on geopolitical interest, especially the Indo-Pacific region, engagement with the Indian diaspora. Also engagement, like I said, with the diaspora, and that really is on the agenda, and that, of course, holds a great deal of significance when it comes to these visits of the Prime Minister. Geeta continues to be with us. Geeta, as far as India is concerned, it's 14 minutes past 9 for us. Give us a sense of what time is the bilateral with President Joe Biden, and what after that, once again, for our viewers.
Well, it's not so long from now that we will be seeing the bilateral, the Quad summit that will take place, and it's the Quad summit. The entire events for Prime Minister Narendra Modi will begin with the Quad summit, followed by bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the Quad summit with various with all the other 3 leaders. And while the Quad summit is going to focus on, like you said, cybersecurity, technology, trade, and particularly resilient supply chains, there is going to be a lot more conversations on Chinese aggression, the wars, and how to move forward on bilateral relations when it comes to Japan, Australia, and the United States of America. There are elections that are going to be held in Japan, the elections that are going to be held in the United States of America. So consider this as one of the last meetings with these leaders, and we will have to see whether there's going to be continuity should Kamala Harris return, or whether there's going to be a new chapter should Trump return. Either way, India is in good stead when it comes to relations between the 2 countries, because no matter which leader or who comes to power in the United States of America, it's very clear, Sneha, that they want to engage India, but India is an important partner for the United States of America at this point in time.
Well, absolutely. We have pictures of the Prime Minister interacting with members of the diaspora. Of course, this was organized in Delaware. Geeta, the big event in New York, where I understand that there are going to be around 400 artists or so who would be performing. Just talk to us a little about that, because, you know, each time the Prime Minister steps out of the country, there are obviously huge concert-like events, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. This time around also, it's going to be a massive event. The first time around, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in the United States of America. There was one of the biggest diaspora events, and that was at Madison Square Gardens.
Yes.
This time it's going to be in Long Island. Again, a massive event of the Indian community. And also, Sneha, interestingly, it's not just the diaspora from New York that you'd see in at this event. There are many who travel far and wide just to come for the Indian community event of Prime Minister Modi, and you will be seeing that this time around as well. Although in Delaware, the women and the Indian diaspora that waited to welcome him at the airport and later at the hotel are very clearly from Delaware, from Biden's hometown, and were very, very happy to welcome him. So there's one, you see all these women and men who come dressed in their finery just to welcome Prime Minister Modi, and it's a fine display, in many ways, than one of Indian culture. They were dressed in Indian attire from various states, and also then performed Garba right outside the hotel.
Well, absolutely.
And now, again, at the Indian community event, it is going to be huge. There's massive number of people, and so much so that a lot of Indian community members of the Indian community have not been able to secure that ticket or pass to actually attend the event, because that's how full that entire area or arena is going to look like and be. So it's going to be a massive event. There are performances, there's going to be a lot of conversation, and Prime Minister Modi is going to yet again address the Indian community over there. He is also going to address, and that speech is going to be very important, the Summit of the Future. And that's, Sneha, very important because that's where all the global leaders are going to come and talk about the issues that really have rattled the world, that have really taken on the world and have created many a disruption, whether it's the wars, the conflicts, the break in supply chains, all that and more. So, and of course, climate change and sustainability. So all that will be discussed. A significant speech will be delivered by Prime Minister Modi at the Summit for the Future.
All right. I'm just going to come back to you in a moment from now. Geeta, be with us. The Prime Minister has also just tweeted, and we're going to be putting that out for our viewers. Take a look at what the Prime Minister said on X or Twitter. The Indian community has distinguished itself in the USA, making a positive impact across diverse sectors. It's always a delight to interact with them. At around 9:30 p.m. India time on Sunday, 22nd of September, I will address the Modi and US program in New York City. So essentially giving out the details of that, also acknowledging their role. Let's celebrate, he says, the bonds that connect our nations. Gaurav continues to be with us for more on that. Gaurav, we've been talking about the role of the diaspora and the role essentially that they play in spreading the message of India outside of the country, in lobbying for India. Not just that, in just playing the role of ambassadors for India outside the country, isn't it?
They're a very important, section in the United States of America. And since you mentioned lobbying, if I may, there are some commentators in the United States of America who say that Indians are the new Jews in the United States of America. They impact US policy so effectively and to an extent that their financial clout is also increasing. And also the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whether it was, that shift when it was taking place from Barack Obama to Donald Trump, or from Donald Trump to Joe Biden, and now from Joe Biden to whoever comes, the Prime Minister or the Indian establishment, the Ministry of External Affairs, makes sure that India is very well keyed in and genned up with whatever administration is taking over. India has a great equation with the Democrats and with the Republicans, and not just with the political leaders, but also with diplomats, with think tanks. India very extensively engages the United States of America, and also industry. Do keep in mind, Sneha, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is spending considerable time this time interacting with some of the top CEOs in the United States of America. And that CEO interaction is very strictly, about the new technology that India requires. In terms of India wants a lot of co-development, co-research and co-manufacturing in India. Artificial intelligence is one area where India has played a big role, or where India seeks to play a big role. When supply chains post-COVID were disrupted, and Geeta Mohan has been talking about it extensively, India has been talking about manufacturing in India. And there are many analysts who say, look at how several countries, if they're not leaving China completely, but they're doing China plus one, and they want to manufacture in India. And that is where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is.
And news is coming in. The Prime Minister has landed in Philadelphia in the US. He's on a 3-day trip to the United States. Modi-Biden bilateral later tonight. That's on top of the agenda. He's there for a 3-day visit for the Quad Summit. We'll be getting in more details as my colleagues join us. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, is with us. And also Gaurav Sawant, our Managing Editor, also with us. Rohit Sharma continues to be with us from the US. For more on that, I'm going to be bringing in Gaurav to this conversation at this point in time. Gaurav, it's a 3-day visit of the Prime Minister. Now, all eyes really on the Quad, given the situation that we're seeing in various countries. But of course, the bilateral with US President Joseph Biden tonight. Give us a sense of what are the deliverables as far as India is concerned. What is it that we're looking at?
So this is a very important visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States of America. Do remember that this, in a way, is a farewell for President Joe Biden. this was India's turn to host the Quad Summit, and Quad 2024 was to be held in India, but at the request of the United States. And this also shows how close India and the United States are. The US requested, since it's President Biden's farewell, can this be held in the US? And India said, of course, go ahead. This also is the farewell of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan. So 2 of the 4 Quad's head of state and government would be bidding farewell to Quad in their personal capacities. And next year, when it's held in India, US will have a new president and Japan will have a new prime minister. But the bilateral one-on-one, look, India-US relationship, it's become much stronger than what it was earlier, and in new areas. And to an extent, defense, foreign affairs, strategy, coordination on Indo-Pacific, space technology, military technology. These are things which are really steering the India-US relationship. So there'll be an intense conversation on that. While Prime Minister has a one-on-one with the US President, he also has a one-on-one with all the other Quad members. So he'll be meeting Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, he'll be meeting Fumio Kishida, the Japan Prime Minister separately, and of course President Joe Biden. Then, he moves for the second leg of his visit, and that again is very interesting. Apart from his interaction with the Indian diaspora, it's the summit of the future, where the Prime Minister will lay a roadmap or his vision of how the world should tackle the situation that the world is facing right now. There are 2 very major battles that are on, one in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, the other between Israel and Hamas terrorists, and Hezbollah has a new angle to that war. So how do you ensure, one, there is a movement, there's a way forward that you move towards peace. While you move to peace, the global supply chain is not adversely impacted due to these wars. And the global south, India is the voice of the global south or the developing countries. They are heard loud and clear.
Gaurav getting in those details. And Gaurav, even as I speak with you, we're staying in those pictures of the members of the diaspora. I mean, no visit of the Prime Minister outside of India abroad is complete without this huge show of support and love and respect that he gets from members of the diaspora, isn't it? And there is an event which is scheduled also, that is for tomorrow, I think, in New York, in Long Island.
You're absolutely right. A very important community event. It's the Indian American community, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has often described as the ambassadors of India in the United States of America and the human bridge between the 2 countries.
True.
And the diaspora, one, their numbers have increased, and 2, their power has increased. They're economically very powerful now. Technologically, India is very powerful, and they're very well respected, unlike many other countries whose diaspora is frowned upon or looked down upon in the United States of America. Indian diaspora is very well respected because they blend in and they help those countries grow. So when the Prime Minister addresses them and talks to them about India's achievements, they carry that story forward. They carry the India story to the United States. So the Prime Minister's interaction with the diaspora at Long Island, it's a community event, also becomes extremely important. Though it remains to be seen whether this year you'll have a number of American political leaders who will be participating, because I had covered the Madison Square Garden event of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I'd also covered Howdy Modi in Houston, and that time a number of political leaders in the United States came and attended that diaspora event, and that showed India's rising clout in the world order, and especially in the United States of America, Sneha.
Gaurav, also what is expected is the Prime Minister is going to be, in fact, taking part, at an event as far as the UN is concerned. There's going to be a meeting, or there's going to be an address by the Prime Minister as well. Tell us a little more about that.
So this is Summit of the Future.
Yes.
It's a very important global event. It's a very important event of the United Nations. What would the world look like, and what should the world be? Which is where India plays a very critical role. And in this Summit of the Future, the world right now is going through intense turmoil. When you look at the Russia-Ukraine war that's been on for several years now, and everybody expected that this war would perhaps hold up in a couple of weeks, if not months. It's been on for over 2 years. The war between Israel and Hamas, and now Hezbollah adding a new angle to it, that will practically be in the next couple of days. It will be 1 year of that terrible attack on Israel. and its impact. So how is this war impacting? If the global supply chain is being impacted, food supplies are being impacted, fuel supplies are being impacted, prices are going up. And while Europe would want the whole world to, be with them or be with the NATO countries, India has that very strong voice, like we saw during the G20 summit in India, where India emerged as the voice of the developing world. And India was repeatedly trying to tell the world, that war is your war. That's not our war. And why should we be adversely impacted by that war? Look at the prices of fuel that's going up. Europe is suffering. The world is suffering. But why should the developing countries suffer?
That's right.
That's
I'll just come back to you, Gaurav, in a moment from now. Please be with us. You rightly pointed out that going to be, in fact, the theme really is multilateral solutions for a better tomorrow as far as the Summit of the Future is concerned. But before that, this ground report that my colleague Rohit has in fact sent us. Let's take a look at his interaction with members of the diaspora there.
प्रधानमंत्री मोदी से जब वहाँ यहाँ पे होंगे तो let's try to walk around or let's try to see if, hi ma'am, you are waiting for the Prime Minister's visit. What are you, like, why are you so excited about him coming to town?
It's his first time here in Delaware, so we're just super excited. Everyone, as you can see, we're all have big smiles on our faces. We're just looking forward to meeting him here.
Are you local? Are you from Delaware?
Yes, we are from here, Gujarat, and here Delaware.
अच्छा, आप गुजरात से हैं?
Yeah, गुजरात से है.
गुजरात में कहाँ से आप?
बड़ौदा से.
तो प्रधानमंत्री मोदी की इस visit में, what are your thoughts? Why are you excited about him this time around?
Because he done lot of for our India, so that was our dream. And I don't know, after we see him, it's gonna be dream again.
आप में से कितने लोग संडे को उनके इवेंट में जा रहे हैं?
कोई
मैंने सुना टिकट नहीं मिल पा रही है लोगों को.
यहाँ पे ही काम करा है, इवेंट में नहीं काम करा है, हो रहा है. तो
कोई परफॉर्मेंस है प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के लिए, कुछ आप लोग करने वाले हैं?
Definitely, we're super excited. Representing our Gujarat, actually.
You're representing गुजरात और आप लोकली डेलावेयर यहाँ पे रहते हैं.
न्यू जर्सी से आए.
आप जर्सी से यहाँ पे आए हैं. आप जा रहे हैं प्रोग्राम में प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के संडे को? आप भी नहीं जा पा रहे.
तो ये उनके सिग्नेचर हमने लिए, and we are so proud because this brings out the history of the Chandragupta and the entire empire of the Guptas, so the golden age of India.
मोदी का हार्दिक स्वागत करने के लिए यहाँ पे उपस्थित रहे हैं और मोदी जी ने सबको बहुत ही रिस्पेक्टफुली हाथ मिला के बहुत ही अभिवादन दिया, उसके लिए हम उनके धन्यवाद प्राप्त करते हैं.
All right, members of the diaspora all excited to welcome the Prime Minister. Some of them have already met with the Prime Minister. Rohit is with us from Delaware, getting us up to speed with those details. Rohit, in just some time from now, the Prime Minister is going to be having an all-important bilateral with US President Joe Biden. Give us a sense of what really is going on right now as we speak, and in how much time from now does that meeting start?
Well, so we are standing right outside the president's residence. So I'll try to turn my camera and show you exactly where we are. This is Joe Biden's private residence. I mean, we are stationed just right outside of the residence here, and the meeting is supposed to be started anytime now. We've given it a start time of 1 o'clock, and it looks like there's been some delay. I just got an email from the press office of the White House reading out the meeting of President Biden and that of Prime Minister. Prime things discussed in this meeting, as we've been stating since this morning. They will talk about China, they'll talk about Russia, they'll talk about the war, they will talk about India-US relationship, they will talk about cooperation in semiconductors. There will be so many things that we'll discuss in this meeting. This is a one-hour meeting between President Joe Biden and President Prime Minister Modi and President Joe Biden. And look, the importance of the meeting cannot be understated. This is President Joe Biden inviting Prime Minister Modi at his house. This is very as personal as it gets. This is the final bilateral meeting the leaders will have, and it is President Joe Biden making sure he sticks to what he had said when he took over the presidency. Remember, he said when he took over the presidency, he said this is the most consequential relationship between of this century, that is between India and the US. So very important deliverables coming out of this meeting. We'll probably have a media release around 6 p.m. Eastern. But as I said, very important meeting. Prime Minister Modi has been elected for the third time. I think one of the most important things that could happen today is the Quad meeting, where China and Russia will be also discussed, as per Jake Sullivan. So important meetings, and it will start in a while from now.
All right, important meeting, and it's going to start in just some time from now. Any time now is what Rohit is telling us. Even as all eyes on the bilateral, the Prime Minister, remember, is in the US for the Quad Summit, the 4th Quad Summit. And Geeta Mohan, a Foreign Affairs editor, is with us for more on that. Geeta, give us a sense of what is going to be discussed threadbare as far as the Quad Summit, the meeting of the 4 countries, are concerned.
Well, there are a few very important aspects of any Quad meeting, and the fact that there is always a reiteration, Sneha, that this is not a military bloc, which is what Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, also reiterated when he said that it is not a military bloc. It's not a bloc that is counter China or an anti-China bloc. This certainly is a bloc to secure the Indo-Pacific, focus on the Indo-Pacific, and see how the Indo-Pacific can collaborate, cooperate, and move forward on various fronts. What are the areas that you asked? We're looking at the Indo-Pacific architecture. Strengthening the Indo-Pacific architecture is the foremost agenda of the Quad when it comes to not just security, but freedom of navigation in particular. Then there is, in terms of trade and cooperation, this certainly is, there's a major economic aspect to this entire grouping, and the focus is resilient supply chain. So that's another area that they have been discussing, how to become the 4 countries, how they can become key to creating a resilient supply chain. And this conversation became all the more important after the world suffered huge disruptions during COVID and were absolutely dependent on China. So that is another aspect. And like you, Sneha, earlier were talking about the fact that there is a major aspect of technology, digital cooperation, artificial intelligence, and countering cyber security threats. That's cyber warfare. So these are areas that certainly are going to be discussed, talked, and there is going to be an outcome document, a joint communique at the conclusion of the summit level meeting, which will not only specify all these areas, but also we've been reiterating this again and again, that this is the last summit that President Biden would be hosting or participating, because he is on his way out. And so this is a legacy item for him. The summit level meetings began under his presidency, and they'd like to show deliverables this time.
All right. Be with us, Geeta. I'll just come back to you in a moment from now, also to Rohit. Just giving our viewers a sense of the agenda of the Quad meeting that Geeta detailed upon as well. Global conflicts, understandably, will be figuring in the discussions, including the situation in Ukraine and Gaza. That's certainly on the agenda. Regional security and cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. Defense and technology collaborations. Announcements of new initiatives to prevent, detect and treat cancer, which is the Cancer Moonshot initiative that is going to be discussed at the Quad Summit. Rohit continues to be with us. Rohit, as far as Delaware is concerned, the Prime Minister is going to be wrapping up the visit today and then also be moving to New York, where he's got an engagement with the Diaspora. That event is there, and then he is going to be also a part of the UNGA, a meeting at the UNGA, which the Prime Minister is also set to address, isn't it?
Yes, he will be meeting with the president,
yes.
And then there's a Quad summit that we've talked about. And tonight he goes to New York. Tomorrow there's a Diaspora event. On Monday is when he addresses the Summit for Future. Again, very important. There will be a very important outcomes from these meetings today, and I think some of those will play. When he talks at the UN, and also tomorrow the Diaspora event. So a lot of these things and these meetings and deliverables that will be discussed today would be talked about by the Prime Minister tomorrow, and also on Monday when he addresses the UN. Look, and he also has a lot of bilateral meetings set up at UN. We know he's meeting with the Nepalese Prime Minister, from the Vietnamese Prime Minister, and there are other big names also that he would actually end up meeting while he is at the UN. So very important meetings lined up for Prime Minister about this visit, although this is a very short one at that, but it's jam-packed with a lot of meetings, a lot of stuff that will happen, and off the record. I mean, some people are not yet confirming that he could end up meeting with the presidential candidate. So that's not off the table yet, but it could very well happen tomorrow. So this is going to be a very interesting, visit by the Prime Minister.
Well, absolutely. Geeta, the Prime Minister has already tweeted, and there's a second tweet that has come in of the Prime Minister talking about the fact, essentially, that the meetings with the diaspora are always cherished. He's spoken about these meetings in the past as well. They've always, in fact, been the highlight of these events, and he's taken part in outside of India. This also speaks volumes to the kind of importance that the Prime Minister and this government attaches to the sentiments of the diaspora and the role they play in sending out the message of India, or in many ways, playing the role of the ambassadors of India as outside of India, isn't it?
Well, absolutely.
Yes.
Look at the visuals, Neha. It never ever tires the Indian diaspora down in an event such as this, where they're meeting Prime Minister Modi. Many of them have met the Prime Minister in the past as well. But this has become a very important part of the Indian administration's soft power policy toolkit, that a strengthened Indian diaspora strengthens bilateral relations between two countries, between India and whichever country that Prime Minister Modi is visiting. And that's certainly something that that plays to India's strength, which is what we're seeing over here also. And again, interestingly, Sneha, it is coming at a time when the United States of America is going into elections. Indian community, a very, very strong community over there. And therefore, the big meetings that could take place on the sidelines of the summit for the future, that is going to be very critical. The Indian side wanted both the presidential candidates, meetings with both the presidential candidates, and it's this diaspora that will impact certain states in terms of the voting, and translating those votes into wins of the states for the Democrats or the Republicans. The Indian side wants to meet both the leaders. Donald Trump himself went ahead and announced the meeting. So one was wondering whether if there
be
could
with
only be
us.
a Trump.
In fact, I'm just going to go straight across to Rohit. Let's just get a sense of what's happening on the ground. Yes, Rohit.
We just saw the Prime Minister's car pull into the private residence of Joe Biden. He just pulled in. Now is when the leaders will meet. We'll probably see visuals coming in from the inside. But Prime Minister actually just went inside Biden's residence. They would be discussing topics that we've been talked about. We've now asked to move from here. I think that they're taking us to a different location. But Prime Minister is right now at the Biden residence meeting with President Joe Biden.
Meeting has just begun, or probably beginning in just a few seconds from now. But we're staying with these pictures right now coming in from the Prime Minister's, from the President's private residence.
Sir, are we moving?
Okay, Rohit continues to be with us. Rohit, we have the pictures right now of the Prime Minister's entourage there arriving at the private residence of President Joe Biden.
Yeah, he just entered, Sneha. As you're probably seeing from the visual, he just got in here. And I think we've been asked to probably move to a different location so we can see them talk and shake hands. So I'll probably move to cover that while you speak to Geeta.
All right, yes, sure. Rohit, I will. In fact, these are pictures from earlier today with the Prime Minister interacting with the members of the diaspora. But we are going to be putting out those pictures of the Prime Minister arriving at President Joe Biden's private residence. Geeta, also, in fact, Geeta continues to be with us. Geeta, there are several... Okay. Right, the Prime Ministers, we'll be getting in more details in just a second from now, but the meetings would have just begun. In fact, it's set to begin with President Joe Biden. Let's give you a sense of the significance of this visit. It underscores undoubtedly strengthening of India-US bond, the highlights of which are going to be technology, trade and defense collaboration. Also promoting technology collaboration, especially in the area of artificial intelligence and cyber security. Also it highlights India-UC space collaboration, promotes the joint efforts in combating climate change. Also the focus on geopolitical interests, especially the Indo-Pacific region. And lastly, and importantly though, engagement with the Indian diaspora. The Desi factor still very much a very important factor, Geeta, even as we're staying with the pictures of the Prime Minister interacting with the members of the diaspora there. 4.5 million Indian Americans in the US. He is in Delaware, where a small group, I would say, is meeting with the Prime Minister, but the big event is scheduled when he moves to New York, isn't it?
Well, before we move into that conversation, that's news just coming in. That's breaking news, Sneha. President Biden and Prime Minister Modi's bilateral meeting has just begun. That's the big news that's coming in. Bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden has just begun. So the bilateral meeting starts first, and then they're going to move into the Quad Summit level meeting. So that's news just coming in. And the bilateral meeting will focus on various aspects of the bilateral relationship, as also regional and global conversations, which will include Russia-Ukraine war. President Biden is going to get a briefing on, will be briefed by Prime Minister Modi, according to Jake Sullivan, on his visit to Ukraine, meetings with Zelensky, meeting with Putin. That's one aspect. There is going to be conversation on Israel-Hamas situation, and the United States of America, again, according to Sullivan, expects India to take a position when it comes to Russia. And there is also going to be a lot of conversation on cooperation on the trade front, defense, technology transfer. There is one niggling issue, that's the summons that we saw recently on the Gurpatwant Singh murder for hire charges against India. An update on whether if there is any forward movement on the high-level inquiry committee that was set up by the Indian side. A very important issue that we broke not so long ago was that India-China border situation will also come up during conversations. The National Security Advisor of US said that Chinese actions in the region, which also includes the border situation between India and China, are also part of the conversations that could take place between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. So that's news just coming in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Biden's bilateral meeting has just begun.
All right. These are pictures, in fact, from Prime Minister's meeting with the US President Joe Biden. We'll be getting in more details on that in just a few seconds from now. But these are visuals from a few moments ago, the very moment when Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, reached the private residence of President Joe Biden in Delaware. These are visuals of the Indian Prime Minister's entourage there, which just, in fact, a few moments ago, like I said, just has entered the private residence of President Joe Biden. Let's take a look at these pictures. And even as we stay with those details, what is expected next is the Quad Summit, the meeting between 4 countries. Geeta, we've been talking about what could be the possible deliverables there. Just give us a sense of what are the kind of discussions also expected at the Quad. And I understand that there are a series of meetings with CEOs of companies as well. What more details can you give us about that as far as businesses here are concerned, and the Prime Minister meeting CEOs of top businesses?
Well, look at the place where Prime Minister Modi has just entered, the gates that Prime Minister Modi has just entered. This is the home of President Biden. So they have personalized this entire visit. They've made it personal. They've made it very a closed group affair of these 4 important leaders from across the world coming together under one roof, under Biden's roof, to have conversations that have and would have deep impact and deep global implications. So it's very interesting that they chose Delaware, and they chose President Biden's residence as the venue for the Quad Summit, which is going to be a legacy for President Biden. Having said that, the Quad Summit will begin in some time from now. And like we said, defense technology collaborations, digital security, cyber security, global supply chain, resilience in the global supply chains as a counter to what one suffered because of China and the disruptions during COVID. The economic framework when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, how to strengthen that, and global supply chains come within that framework itself. Pacific security architecture, expansion of maritime cooperation is something that that all four countries are going to look at. But at this point in time, Sneha, what is of great importance is the fact that a final meeting, official meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi is underway as we speak. Prime Minister Modi is meeting President Biden for the bilateral conversations, which means that it's a restricted dialogue followed by a delegation level meeting between the two sides, and they are going to look at the entire ambit of the relationship between the two countries. There are various aspects that will be discussed, but again, are there deliverables this time around? There will certainly be a statement on how they're moving forward, but consider this a review meeting of what has been and what can be achieved between the two countries, given that this certainly is almost now a lame duck presidency of President Biden. So do not expect major policy announcements. There certainly could be deals or things moving forward, of which conversations have been taking place for a while.
Well, absolutely. Rohit Sharma back with us for more on that. Rohit, as far as the bilaterals are concerned, we have a sense of how there could be, and there are obviously some sticky points, some sticky issues. Give us a sense of what these essentially are and how are they going to be taken up in this meeting. Geeta has been telling us that largely this is going to be a stock-taking kind of an exercise, a review of what was done in the past, and moving forward, how can things get smoother?
Well, look, it is kind of that. I think, as we said before, it's kind of a thank you from both the leaders. But also, you've got to look at the fact that finally we have something called as the Quad Caucus, which was announced yesterday by the White House. It ensures that there's continuity. Whoever wins the White House, there will be support for Quad going forward. I think that's Biden's one of the biggest deliverables, that they were able to get it done. It's not easy to get things done over on the Capitol Hill, but to make sure that there's a Quad Caucus that would vouch for Quad, regardless of whoever is in charge in the White House. I think it speaks volumes about what Biden has been able to achieve. As far as some of the sticking points goes, I mean, look, Russia, the US obviously wants Russia to be brought up, to be discussed. It thinks India has the power to be able to convince Russia to stop this war. We will see. We'll have to wait and watch and see what happens and what becomes of that. But long story short, I think that's one of the things that will be discussed. There is obviously, this report that came out this morning about some of the people from the Khalistani people meeting with the White House. That I'm not sure if that'll be discussed or not, but White House did acknowledge that there was a meeting that took place. They've expressed concerns about democracy in the past. We will have to wait and watch if that was discussed or not. So these have been, some of the points that we usually see coming out of some of these meetings. But at the end of the day, I think, the relationship is robust. It has been on an upward trajectory since the last 10, 12, 14 years. And that's what we'll see. And look, one of the few things that both Republicans and Democrats agree on is a strong relationship with India. And I think that is what we'll continue to see, regardless of whoever wins the White House in November. So Joe Biden, from his perspective, as Geeta said, there might not be a big policy decision, but there could be things in the joint statement, that could probably be like, there could be funding announced, there could be joint efforts announced. And again, those would have backing of both the parties, regardless of whoever's in power at the White House. And I think that is what we have to look for. Apart from that, there isn't much, that hasn't been already touched upon. Supply chain, semiconductors, we talked about that. We talked about global security, very important thing. And look, one of the things that I really want to talk about today is the relationship in itself. US has had a very great relationship with UK and Australia, and I think the US is elevating India to that point where you never see, there's a change in power, that the US position with UK or Australia changes. I think India is getting to that point where, regardless of whatever political wins we have here this fall, India's relationship would be prioritized by both the parties, and I think that would be something that an assurance probably given to India. And also the fact that Prime Minister Modi himself has said it on the record that India's got friends across political spectrum in the US. So we'll have to wait and watch. But again, as Geeta pointed out, might not be big policy changes, but definitely something that would outlast at least a couple of years or whoever is in charge, at least the next 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely. And what's going to be also important in this meeting, Geeta, is the fact that India is obviously going to be briefing the US. The Prime Minister will be telling President Joe Biden himself about the situation vis-a-vis India-China relationship and about China, about what really is happening in the region, isn't it? That is extremely significant and that is expected.
Well, absolutely. That's certainly going to be one very important aspect of the conversations that are taking place right now as we speak between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. A lot of conversation if India is going to become peace broker. If you ask me, Sneha, right now, even being a messenger, knowing exactly what Russia is thinking and what Ukraine is thinking in itself is a huge advantage that India has over all those countries who have taken sides, who are either with Ukraine or stand with Russia. They do not know what the other country is thinking in terms of exactly what's happening inside the country in terms of policy decisions. Over here, Prime Minister Modi has the advantage of having spoken to both the leaders. And yes, President Biden will be hearing from Prime Minister Modi as to what is it that the Russian side is thinking, wants, knows, and exactly what was discussed with Zelensky when it comes to how to move forward. At the end of the day, a country like India at this juncture can play a very important role when it comes to bringing the two sides to the negotiating table. But the two sides have to really decide on coming to the negotiating table, and that certainly does not look like a situation that both countries have arrived at to really have a conversation towards peace. Right now, they're looking at a war plan and a victory plan on how to move forward, which will lead to peace.
Geeta, be with us. I'll just come back to you in a moment from now as we continue to get our viewers more details that bilateral between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden, which is currently underway. With my colleague reporting live from Delaware, Rohit Sharma is there. Geeta Mohan with the perspective right here, getting you more on that big story in just 2 minutes from now. News is coming in. The Prime Minister has landed in Philadelphia in the US. He's on a 3-day trip to the United States. Modi-Biden bilateral later tonight. That's on top of the agenda. He's there for a 3-day visit for the Quad Summit. We'll be getting in more details as my colleagues join us. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, is with us. And also Gaurav Sawant, our Managing Editor, also with us. Rohit Sharma continues to be with us from the US. For more on that, I'm going to be bringing in Gaurav to this conversation at this point in time. Gaurav, it's a 3-day visit of the Prime Minister. Now, all eyes clearly on the Quad, given the situation that we're seeing in various countries. But of course, the bilateral with US President Joseph Biden tonight. Give us a sense of what are the deliverables as far as India is concerned. What is it that we're looking at?
So this is a very important visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States of America. Do remember that this, in a way, is a farewell for President Joe Biden. This was India's turn to host the Quad Summit, and Quad 2024 was to be held in India, but at the request of the United States. And this also shows how close India and the United States are. The US requested, since it's President Biden's farewell, can this be held in the US? And India said, of course, go ahead. This also is the farewell of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan. So 2 of the 4 Quad's head of state and government would be bidding farewell to Quad in their personal capacities. And next year, when it's held in India, US will have a new president and Japan will have a new prime minister. But the bilateral one-on-one, look, India-US relationship, it's become much stronger than what it was earlier and in new areas. And to an extent, defense, foreign affairs, strategy, coordination on Indo-Pacific, space technology, military technology. These are things which are really steering the India-US relationship. So there'll be an intense conversation on that. While Prime Minister has a one-on-one with the US President, he also has a one-on-one with all the other Quad members. So he'll be meeting Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, he'll be meeting Fumio Kishida, the Japan Prime Minister separately, and of course President Joe Biden. Then, he moves for the second leg of his visit, and that again is very interesting. Apart from his interaction with the Indian diaspora, it's the summit of the future where the Prime Minister will lay a roadmap or his vision of how the world should tackle the situation that the world is facing right now. There are two very major battles that are on, one in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, the other between Israel and Hamas terrorists, and Hezbollah is a new angle to that war. So how do you ensure, one, there is a movement, there's a way forward that you move towards peace. While you move to peace, the global supply chain is not adversely impacted due to these wars. And the global south, India is the voice of the global south or the developing countries. They are heard loud and clear.
Gaurav getting in those details. And Gaurav, even as I speak with you, we're staying in those pictures of the members of the diaspora. I mean, no visit of the Prime Minister outside of India abroad is complete without this huge show of support and love and respect that he gets from members of the diaspora, isn't it? And there is an event which is scheduled also, that is for tomorrow, I think, in New York, in Long Island.
You're absolutely right. A very important community event. It's the Indian American community, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has often described as the ambassadors of India in the United States of America and the human bridge between the two countries. And the diaspora, one, their numbers have increased, and two, their power has increased. They're economically very powerful now. Technologically, India is very powerful, and they're very well respected, unlike many other countries whose diaspora is frowned upon or looked down upon in the United States of America. Indian diaspora is very well respected because they blend in and they help those countries grow. So when the Prime Minister addresses them and talks to them about India's achievements, they carry that story forward. They carry the India story to the United States. So the Prime Minister's interaction with the diaspora at Long Island, it's a community event, also becomes extremely important. Though it remains to be seen whether this year you'll have a number of American political leaders who will be participating, because I had covered the Madison Square Garden event of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I'd also covered Howdy Modi in Houston, and that time a number of political leaders in the United States came and attended that diaspora event, and that showed India's rising clout in the world order, and especially in the United States of America, Sneha.
Gaurav, also what is expected is the Prime Minister is going to be, in fact, taking part, at an event as far as the UN is concerned. There's going to be a meeting, or there's going to be an address by the Prime Minister as well. Tell us a little more about that.
So this is Summit of the Future.
Yes.
It's a very important global event. It's a very important event of the United Nations. What would the world look like, and what should the world be? Which is where India plays a very critical role. And in the Summit of the Future, the world right now is going through intense turmoil. When you look at the Russia-Ukraine war that's been on for several years now, and everybody expected that this war would perhaps hold up in a couple of weeks, if not months. It's been on for over 2 years. The war between Israel and Hamas, and now Hezbollah adding a new angle to it. That will practically be, in the next couple of days, it will be 1 year of that terrible attack on Israel. And its impact. So how is this war impacting? If the global supply chain is being impacted, food supplies are being impacted, fuel supplies are being impacted, prices are going up. And while Europe would want the whole world to, be with them or be with the NATO countries, India has that very strong voice, like we saw during the G20 summit in India, where India emerged as the voice of the developing world. And India was repeatedly trying to tell the world, that war is your war. That's not our war. And why should we be adversely impacted by that war? Look at the prices of fuel that's going up. Europe is suffering. The world is suffering. But why should the developing countries suffer?
That's right. I'll just come back to you, Gaurav, in a moment from now. Please be with us. You rightly pointed out that going to be, in fact, the theme really is multilateral solutions for a better tomorrow as far as the Summit of the Future is concerned. But before that, this ground report that my colleague Rohit has, in fact, sent us. Let's take a look at his interaction with members of the diaspora there.
Modi se jab wahan yahan pe honge, to let's try to walk around, or let's try to see if, hi ma'am, you are waiting for the Prime Minister's visit. What are you, like, why are you so excited about him coming to town?
It's his
first time I hear in Delaware, so we're just super excited. Everyone, as you can see, we're all like have big smiles on our faces. We're just looking forward to meeting him here.
Are you local? Are you from Delaware?
Yes, we are from here, Gujarat, and here Delaware.
अच्छा, आप गुजरात से हैं?
Yeah, गुजरात से है.
गुजरात में कहाँ से आप?
बड़ौदा से.
तो प्रधानमंत्री मोदी की इस विजिट में what are your thoughts? Why are you excited about him this time around?
Because he done lot of for our India, so that was our dream, and I don't know after we see him like it's gonna be dream again.
आप में से कितने लोग संडे को उनके इवेंट में जा रहे हैं?
कोई
मैंने सुना टिकट नहीं मिल पा रही है लोगों को.
यहाँ पे ही काम करा है, इवेंट में नहीं काम करा है.
हो रहा है तो
कोई परफॉर्मेंस है प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के लिए कुछ आप लोग करने वाले हैं?
Definitely, we're super excited.
representing our Gujarat actually.
You're representing गुजरात और आप लोकली डेलावेयर यहाँ पे रहते हैं.
न्यू जर्सी से आए.
आप जर्सी से यहाँ पे आए हैं. आप जा रहे हैं प्रोग्राम में प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के संडे को? आप भी नहीं जा पा रहे. So the tickets are expensive. Thank you. The tickets are obviously very hardly sought after. और ये जो tickets हैं वो लोगों को मिल नहीं पा रही है. And we'll try to talk to some of the people. I think I spot somebody I know from Maryland here. Bijal, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Okay, we'll just in fact play the report out again of Rohit, and these are pictures right now of the Prime Minister, who's just in fact landed in Philadelphia a while ago. Just some time from now, there is going to be a bilateral with US President Joe Biden. He is now, in fact, in Philadelphia in the US, where he's getting a warm welcome. In just some time from now, he is going to be welcomed by President Joe Biden. These are pictures, in fact, of the Prime Minister who has reached Philadelphia a few moments ago. Meeting with Quad leaders also on the agenda. Gaurav continues to be with us. Gaurav, we have pictures playing out of the Prime Minister getting a warm welcome as he arrives in Philadelphia.
There is tremendous enthusiasm amongst the Indian diaspora wherever Prime Minister Narendra Modi travels, because they feel India's stature is rising. We are now the 5th largest economy in the world. We aspire to be the 3rd largest economy. And even before, we've become the 3rd largest economy, the Prime Minister already is talking about India being the top 2 economies of the world in future. So this is how India is constantly working to rise in every sphere. Recently, the Prime Minister had traveled to Ukraine. Before that, in July, he traveled to Russia. And there will be a conversation between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden on the progress that could be made in an effort to find peace in this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Remember that conversation that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had with the Russian President Vladimir Putin? It lasted several hours, between 4 to 5 hours, went on till very late at night. And except the two heads of state and government, only the interpreters were there. So they discussed some ideas. Then Prime Minister Narendra Modi traveled to Ukraine. And from Poland, he traveled by train almost 8 to 10 hours to meet President Zelensky. He was very warmly received in Ukraine. And there they discussed some more ideas. What are those ideas? What's the way forward? National Security Advisor Ajit Doval carried some message back to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and now all of that, perhaps in some form or the other, would be discussed with the US President Joe Biden in an effort to see whether there is a way forward. Because India's stance, Sneha, has been very clear. One, for peace. Both parties have to be on the same table. Both parties have to agree to that formula, and fighting must stop. There has to be a ceasefire. It cannot be a one-sided affair. It cannot be one wins, the other loses. It has to be, give and take on both sides. What's that give and take? Perhaps is the conversation they will be having in the days ahead, and that conversation will be extremely crucial. But that's only one part of the conversation. Since India and the United States of America are very strong, they have a comprehensive strategic partnership. There'll be conversation and a lot of focus on the Indo-Pacific. There'll be a conversation on China. There'll be a conversation on open, sea lanes of communication, peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. While this is seen more as a humanitarian aid and economy and healthcare, cancer research is something, moonshot is something that India is very excited about. How in the Indo-Pacific the world should contribute to fight cancer. Cervical cancer is something that that these countries are focusing increasingly on. So it's a very wide range of issues that the two countries will be talking about, and then in Quad, the four countries will be talking about, Sneha.
Undoubtedly, it's an opportunity, Geeta, isn't it, for all of these countries to really build on their relationship and reflect back as to what was achieved in the year gone by and what is it that they can achieve in the days and weeks to come, essentially.
Well, absolutely. This is going to be one of the most important legacy items for President Biden. The fact that the summit level meeting happened under his presidency, in his presidency, is in itself a very important achievement. So that's certainly something that they're going to drive home, and they are driving home. And yes, they are looking at not just the leadership of these four countries in driving the Indo-Pacific agenda, the National Security Advisor as well. Whether that's the reason or not, we do not really know, and we do not want to speculate. This is a very sensitive issue, and India has already said that India does not indulge in
just
any
come back to you, to talk to you a little more about that, because that's an important thing that you've said, that the National Security Advisor of India is not there for these meetings. And Geeta also, in fact, gave out a list of the members, in fact, of the delegation. But before I go to that particular list and read out the names, I'm getting a quick update from Rohit, who continues to be with us from right outside the private residence of President Joe Biden. Rohit, you have an update for us? The meeting, of course, has started.
Hi. Yes, ma'am. So we were back on the Queen Brand, but yeah, I mean, that's the list that I was going to talk about, that Geeta talked about. Interesting names on that meeting in a glaring omission, as we discussed right now on air, trying to find out, what was discussed and what was not discussed, and obviously take some time for us to decode all of that. But yeah, those are the people attending the meeting, and as Geeta was saying, it is definitely a sensitive matter. So yeah.
All right, Rohit getting in those details. I'll just, in fact, get a word from Geeta as well about a delegation here. Geeta, you pointed out that as far as India is concerned, it has Dr. S. Jaishankar, of course, the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Vinay Mohan Kwatra, the ambassador of India to the US, and Mr. Vikram Misri, the Foreign Secretary, and the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval not in that meeting. What is the inside track of what is going on, and why is that he's not here for this meeting today?
Well, reasons not given.
Yes.
We've very rarely seen the National Security Advisor not being there for a crucial, critical bilateral meeting or a visit of the Prime Minister of India. Very, very rare. In fact, for such an important visit, I don't remember not seeing Ajit Doval in such a meeting. This is maybe the first time that we're looking at such a critical meeting where the National Security Advisor is missing. Although the U.S. National Security Advisor is there, his Indian counterpart is missing. The U.S. Foreign Minister, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is there. His counterpart, Dr. Jaishankar, is there. The ambassador is there from the American side, American ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, and his Indian counterpart, Vinay Kwatra, who was earlier the Foreign Secretary of India. He is there. But it seems like the Foreign Secretary has taken the place, because in the order of things, it's the National Security Advisor, External Affairs Minister, and the Ambassador. And then in case they're not there, then the Foreign Secretary steps in. So the Foreign Secretary in this case has stepped in because the National Security Advisor of India is not in that